It was released exactly 30 years ago today, and its appeal to millions endures. On December the 3rd, 1994, the original PlayStation console hit the market. Over time, the PlayStation and its competitors have continually evolved. Even at the time of its first release, it was heralded as the start of something big in the virtual world.
In December 1994, Sony Computer Entertainment officially released their console, known only as the PlayStation. Built with real-time 3D graphic technology, the fastest processor in gaming, and Sony's home-built CD-ROM drive, Sony set out to build a game console that was more than just a toy, but an interactive device for all ages.
Come on, hit the gas! You're killing me out here!
To reflect on the anniversary, we spoke to Chris Scullion from the video Games Chronicle and Gavin Divers, who runs a gaming blog. Gavin, PlayStation turning 30, what did it do for gaming?
Oh, it was instrumental. Obviously had Atari and Commodore presetting it, but PlayStation brought it into living rooms, brought it into TVs, your Tomb Raider, your Resident Evil, your Grand Theft Auto. It was a game changer.
And literally a game changer.
Yes.
And Chris, what about the impact on society more broadly?
It was a pretty interesting impact because obviously before the PlayStation, it was generally accepted that video games were kind of aimed at younger players. But with the PlayStation, Sony cleverly kind of aimed its marketing at kind of teenagers and people in the clubbing scene. So it made gaming feel more widely accepted among society as a whole, which is obviously something that's carried through to this day.
And your own early memories of the PS1, Gavin, what was it like? What do you remember? What was so transformative about it?
I mean, there is this idea that it's sitting in a bedroom, one individual, but you're sharing experiences with your friends, and sometimes games can be quite difficult, and they get in your mind, and they stay there, and you're like, how do I get past this next bit? And it's a very much shared experience, these stories, these interactive stories.
And back to PS1, was it, that's what you experienced from that, or was it something?
Tomb Raider, Resident Evil, Grand Theft Auto, as I mentioned. Yeah. These were amazing games, so in-depth for their stories. They're so much different from movies, because they're more emotionally driven, because you are the character.
Mm. And Chris, Gavin mentioned some other consoles there. Were PlayStation driven by these competing consoles?
Yeah, in fact, PlayStation started in the first place because Sony and Nintendo were supposed to be making a console together, and Nintendo kind of went with somebody else, and Sony got a bit annoyed, so they thought, fine, we'll make our own. And it turned out to be a pretty big mistake on Nintendo's behalf, because then Sony became a pretty good competitor. But yeah, over the years, Sony and for a time Sega, and now Nintendo and Microsoft with its Xbox, they're all competing, and competition's always healthy, because the more of these consoles you have, the more everyone pushes each other to create more and more impressive games.
And more impressive games, Gavin, where do you see this going potentially, and particularly with AI now?
Well, I believe the next step is probably the metaverse. We're looking into all these companies trying to compete to be the next one that creates a virtual world to observe yourself in. A lot of companies are competing, buying up companies, trying to be the next big one that is the online
And explain
world.
that to me. What exactly is a meta? Okay, it's a world in which you live, but what do you do in that world?
That's it. It's a virtual reality online. But it's as immersive as you could imagine. So we're looking at making kind of haptic suits where you're getting feedback from. So you imagine sitting in the beach and it kind of warms up. So it's the next step. But you can imagine you're here, but then all of a sudden you're in the game, so you're experiencing a completely different level. So that is the next big step that we're moving towards.
And Chris, of course, Scotland itself has actually driven a lot of what's been happening in gaming.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously nowadays when you think of Scotland and video games, everyone immediately goes to Grand Theft Auto. But even before that, games like Lemmings were created in Dundee. And even nowadays, because indie games are becoming more and more prevalent, you've got companies like, there's a company called Keelworks in Edinburgh who made an amazing shooting game called Signe, which was released this year and got a kind of big budget release. There's all the way down to, there's a small team of 2 or 3 guys in Alloa who are making like a old school wrestling game. So there's so many games like all over the world, but Scotland is really holding its own in terms of the breadth of content it's creating.
And Chris, why do you think that is? Why have 2 guys in Alloa been so successful? What drives that in Scotland in particular?
I think it certainly helps at Dundee. The University of Abertay's got a really good video game development scene. It's got one of the best game development courses in the UK as a whole. So I think a lot of developers come to Dundee to learn the craft, and then they stay there. They're now saying that Dundee will soon be 4Gs. Usually they say it's jammed in journalism, and now they're saying that maybe joysticks could be added to that as well.
And Gavin, you were talking about the multiplayer game. How has the image of gaming transformed? So I'm thinking particularly in terms of people might imagine it, as you mentioned earlier on, somebody sitting there in their bedroom, maybe with a violent game that might be disturbing for them. So what is it? What's the reality?
So everybody games nowadays. You talk about Minecraft, which is digital Lego, but we went away from just being a single player sitting in your bedroom to up to 16 people playing online, all talking from multiple countries, all communicating. And you've even got subscription-based platforms like Netflix called PS Network, where you could buy your own games as well. And then you're moving into VR. So it's just exploded with potential from just sitting in a bedroom to... I've got friends from around the world that we play. So there's zombie games, and all the zombies are coming in the window, and there's 6 windows and there's 4 of us, and it's all about the communication. They're coming in and stuff like that. It's just difficult. If you're not a gamer, it's difficult to understand that emotional vibrancy of gaming.
We're talking about the development of PlayStation. What was your personal favourite, would you have said?
Currently just now, so it's difficult when it comes to, you talk about 30 years of movies, you know, what's your one... So
what about favourite era then?
Well, no, but I would still say that this game called Red Dead Redemption 2. So it's got the main storyline, but you could play poker, you could fish, and there's maybe about 30 different fish, and they won't. And it's difficult to get the fish. Yeah. But if you want to hunt, you can make your own clothes out of the animals. So you need to use scent covering to cover your scent, and you need to hunt them via a special button, and you need to have a lot of patience to get them, and then you need to use the right weapon, like a bow or a rifle, and then you need to shoot them in the right place. And if you don't, then you don't get your pelt to make the clothes. So you can imagine all of those faces.
When was that?
Red Dead Redemption 2. A couple of years ago, Chris. I'm not entirely sure.
Chris, what about yourself? A favourite period, a favourite game?
I'm 41, so like I'm getting to that kind of old fart era where I prefer the kind of old days. For me, it'll always be the Mario games, although PlayStation celebrated its 30th and it's done some great stuff. For me, Mario has always been the kind of stuff that's grown with me as I've aged. And earlier this year, my daughter, who's 6, finished her first Mario game. And in terms of pride as a parent, until she gets married, that's not getting beaten, basically.
Well, Gavin and Chris, we should leave it there. Thanks for joining us in Scotland tonight.
Thank you.